We're live.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Now, welcome everyone. This is the 2020 March 11 Diagnostic Working Group meeting. And because we have many meetings on the today call, I would recommend to continue the deep dive around memory leak that we started. But let's spend like 10-15 minutes with the agenda, with the issues here. Oh, it's pretty empty actually. Wow. Is there an issue, Michael, with the script, or like why is it so empty?
Let me take a look. So yeah, so Diag agenda.
That's very suspicious.
Sometimes it.
Oh yeah, okay. I see an agenda on GitHub, so it's probably an issue.
Okay,
I will just copy paste it over.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't know why, but I mean, I just hacked the stuff together, so it's not surprising. It's a little flaky.
Okay. Self-nomination to Diagnostic Working Group.
Yeah, I think that one just needs confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the governance we have says it needs to be posted to the agenda. And
oh, okay. So it's like, okay, then I see lots of approvals. Then is there anyone who disagrees with this? If not, then just let's do it. Or I don't know, Michael, what would be expected on this working group meeting to discuss?
So I think so yeah, I mean, that's fine. It's basically, okay, that can land.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for the other ones, it was just like, before we dive into this stuff, is there anything that, I'd just say, is anything that any one of these issues people think we should discuss this time? Like, is there, do we have Cord? I guess not. I mean, sort of on the async hook side, there is quite a bit of activity. I know I've landed a few PRs, you know, tweaking some of the APIs on the async local storage stuff. So I think that's good. And, you know, if people can continue to try that out and help refine that, that's good. But I don't know, I don't have anything else on that front.
On the async local storage front, we have been trying to migrate some of the existing test cases to the CLS variant, and I mean, with two objectives. One is to see, you know, how improved the user experience or the development effort for the CLS variant, and secondly, to see if there are any use cases or gaps in the APIs that we need to call out early, so that the feature pack can be as robust as possible. So myself and Harshita are trying to implement one unique test case per pattern, and that effort is going on.
Okay.
The other thing I quickly want to touch base on is item number 349, which is report version semantics not defined. We've been through this for a couple of iterations, and all of us have probably voiced our opinion in the issue tracker. Now that node.js v14 is slated to be released in April, and the development cut is expected to happen on March 24th. I'm just wondering, do we need to be taking any decisions before that? or is it something which can be delayed to later as well? Why I'm asking this is because right now the effort is on to make this diagnostic report exit the experimental and make it as stable in 14. So is this something which we need to be deciding along with that?
I think it would be good to come to a conclusion on this. I mean, I guess, is there strong dissent one way or the other? I'm just trying to remember where the last thing lined up.
Basically, there is a kind of a consensus about one single digit report version representative of a set of functionality of set of format for the data. What is not very clear to me is that what are the occasions when you actually bump that single digit. So many people have difference in opinions. Not sure we are converging on that. So at high level, we all are in agreement about bump the version if the structure changes, if there are new keys inserted or new key deleted. But what if the order in which the data appears is reversed, or some of the internal shape of the data that gets changed, not due to a reason of any change in the report generation logic itself, but the actual data that's coming from the runtime has undergone some changes.
Right. I mean, what's the purpose of the number is to know whether you need to change your tool or not, right?
Yes.
So what's the answer in that context?
That actually depends on the purpose of your tool, right? There are one or two or three types of tooling use cases. One is a tool that actually reads the report and renders in a general purpose UI without any transformation applied on that, in which case there is absolutely no concern because the report is a black box to the tool. And the second case is the tool is actually reading, parsing the content, and have predefined understanding assumptions about the structure and the shape of the report. Still, I would say it's not a big deal because the report being in JSON format, the de facto parser is going to be a JSON parser, and it actually provides you an object irrespective of the order or the number of keys and values, etc. The only case where the tool could potentially fail is when it is applying analytics on the data and it expects certain data in certain formats, and the presence and the absence of certain data is actually affecting the functional capability of the tool analytics.
Right. So that one, I think we could come to agreement. The other thing I remember was being discussed there that's, I think, is almost harder is, what about consistency across versions? Like if you have that single number and you like only backport one feature, like you backport a change which affects the report, you know, are we going to do it so it's cumulative only?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then it's even like, well, what does that number mean, right? Like, and how is it useful? Because if the number is not the same for different node versions, does it even help you in the first place?
If each change to the report generates only one bumpy number, that's not a problem. The problem is if several changes bumps the number only one time.
Well, but even if every change bumps the number a different time,
oh, okay, yeah,
you backport the one that changes that from 8 to 9, but you don't backport the one that changes it from 5 to 6. You've now got like a different you know, it actually, that doesn't reflect, the number doesn't reflect the report across versions. But I'm not sure, like if we don't say it's all or nothing, like basically if you want to backport changes to report, you've got to backport them like all the intermediate ones. Then I'm just not sure what the number is good for anymore. But I'm also not sure that's 100% practical. I guess it could affect the first issue too, because if we say that the number is going to be bumped when the data changes, like we can't necessarily say, oh, you're not going to backport that change in the core VM, like in the core runtime, just because it would change the report. You know what I'm saying?
The other question is, in this scenario, in this topic, who is the final authority to take the call? Is it the TSC or this particular working group?
Well, I think this working group could make a recommendation, and if somebody strongly disagrees with that, then it could get raised up to the TSC.
So do we have a consensus about the current proposal that's relevant in the issue tracker? Current proposal that is prevalent in the issue tracker, that is, we bump the number on every change in the key value pair and just keep it as simple as that. Of course, if there is any data type changes as well, though it couldn't be directly related to report, still we cater to that. So that essentially means any structural change, including data type change in the report, means a version bump.
I guess I'm still concerned over what does it mean across node versions?
Yeah.
I'm still leaning towards changing the version if the data changes. I'm not sure a single version is best solution here.
Like versus December or something, you're saying?
Or maybe just not having a version for the report and following only the version from node.js.
Yeah, like I'm thinking thinking in my mind, like either the version means something across releases, or if it doesn't, then just going back to the node versioning.
How does an API handles that?
Well, an API, when we add new APIs, they start as experimental, and then we make a decision at certain points. We say, like right now, we're defining an API version 6, and then only if we backport everything that is an API 6 to say, you know, a previous release like 12 or 10, will we say that that version supports it? And we do know that there are certain cases where, you know, so for example, if we define an API 6 and it's got a particular function and it means that that function cannot, and for some reason that function can't be backported to 10, we will never be able to say 10 supports 6. It's just like, okay, even if we could add some subset of the functions, it wouldn't necessarily say it supports 6. I mean, so it's a bit of a different case in that we very carefully control the changes to the API because it's meant to be purely additive, no breaking changes. And we control how we add things by defining the new version as here's a new set of things. But I think the major difference is that we're not breaking the old APIs, right? Whereas for report, we're not trying to say we're never going to break you. We're just saying we're trying to give you some information about what might change. Yeah, I'm almost. I'm almost back to the like, does it make sense to have a number?
Yeah, I'm starting to lean towards that idea as well. Unless we are going to do the same thing that's being done on an API and making sure that there are no breaking changes, and that to bump a version, you need to backport everything, including changes in the text format, in the data format.
Yep.
I don't think it makes sense to have a version for the report.
Yeah, like unless version 6 means that 6 is the same thing supported in every release, like 10 and 12, both 6 means the same thing. I guess the only other alternative would be to do something where the numbers are not sequential. So they're not like 6 is bigger than 7. And every time there's a change, whether it's in an older release or a newer release, they just get a completely different number. But I'm not sure that's really helpful.
In this case, I think it would be more helpful for us to expose a schema of the report than
Right.
a number.
Right, and that schema, yeah, that might have the same thing, that like you could end up with a slightly different schema per release.
Yeah, and instead of checking version, you can check feature.
Right.
See if the fields exist, if they are arrays or strings, etc.
Right.
Which usually is easier to maintain than trying to maintain every single version.
Yep. Right, so you're not checking different versions. You look at the schema and says, this field that I'm going to use, does it match what I think it should?
Yep. Kind of unrelated, but that's how we do things on LL Node. We don't check versions. We never check versions to determine if something exists. We check assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes LL Node a bit more reliable than if we were checking versions. It also makes it more forward compatible compared to if we're checking versions.
Right, because the version can change, yet the schema is the same, right?
Yes.
Or the assumptions are the same. Yeah, that sounds good. Do you want to propose that in the issue?
I can propose. It might have been proposed already. If it's already proposed, I'll just endorse it. Otherwise, I'll propose it.
Yeah, I don't see it as proposed earlier. You could propose and quickly we can all have consensus on that, and we could actually do the PR also in the core.
Yes.
There is only 2 outstanding issues pending on the report at this moment. One is to basically add the stable tag, and then one small bug related to the fatal error, which myself is debugging at this point. So if we can get this one also in the next 2 weeks, that would be really great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So we got a question in the meantime. I just want to be sure that we have time for that. So maybe let's deal with that as the next one, if it's okay for everyone.
Sure.
Richard, do you want to summarize? I see
Yeah.
you here, but yeah.
Sure. I'm working with a third-party vendor, and they're kind of curious how crash reporting works in Node. I talked to Thomas Watson about this, and he said maybe jumping on this call would be a good place to start. So these are just my general questions. I can go through them one by one, or if you want to write responses and take your time, that also works really well. I'm not sure I understand crash reporting very well at all, so I'm kind of a newbie. In fact, the best practices guide would be great. That's one of the issues above. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know if you want me to go through each question and sort of ask and then have you respond. That might take 10 minutes. I know you don't have that much time. So
I'm just reading the questions now. If anyone wants to jump in.
So I don't see any reason why you couldn't use experimental report in an Electron app. That's one question.
my main question, I guess, is how, because Electron sort of runs from Electron. I don't know how to implement a node flag in Electron. I guess I can look
Okay,
that
that I don't know, because I haven't worked recently enough in Electron if they have a way to pass through options to the node run.
That would be a good question for the Electron project.
Yeah, I'll go ask them.
Yeah.
The other ones, I think maybe we should create an issue.
I can create issues. Yeah, just question issues. If that's a good, like, if there's a better place, where should those be? In the diagnostics repo?
Yeah, you can open on the diagnostic repo. We can use those questions to drive or restructure the documents we are writing on diagnostics. So
I'm going to help with that as well. I just don't know what to ask, right? This is all new territory for me, although I've been involved with Node for a while, so I'm just sort of curious.
But yeah, if you include in there a little bit of what you're trying to get to, like what's your goal as well, would probably give some context would be good.
Okay, add goal a bit more. I will try to get the mission clearer.
Okay.
I will open an issue with all these questions. I think rather than opening separate issues, I'll just do one giant issue for these.
Yep.
And then we can respond as time goes on. Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Richard is going to open. Yeah, and the unfortunate timing is that we started to do the deep dives, and one of them is, that's what I was checking in the meantime, is crash report, but it's like, it's just to-dos now. So hopefully in the future there will be some documentation when we get there.
Yep.
Okay, so is there any item on the agenda that we need to discuss, or should we jump to continue the memory deep dive? If anyone wants to discuss something, then speak now.
Just a reminder, I think it was Jurish mentioned already, but the branch cutoff to V14 is March 24. So if there's any diagnostic tooling we want to include or any features we want to include related to diagnostics that are major changes, we should sort that out by March 24th.
Okay, so what was the March 24 again?
Branch cutoff to the next LTS release.
Oh, okay. Okay, is there anything that someone has in their mind related to this or other things? Okay. Then I'm going to switch to the deep dive. It was a long time ago. I think it was like a month ago when we last time was doing this. So basically last time we started to collect the memory leak related user journeys and tools, and just quickly summarizing. So basically we were following the structure when like we were saying what the user would do, and the first step was the user would have basically a suspicion about the memory leak, then kind of confirming that it's a memory leak. And then we started to talk about that, like, what would you do after you have a very strong suspicion or you know that there's a memory leak? And we discussed the sampling heap profiler, the heap snapshot, and then we were running out of the time, and we put the wall grind that we know is another tool. And that's where we are. So I guess the first question would be, So other than the heap profiler and the heap snapshot and the wall grind, which you already have some documentation, which is more crash related, what other tools can come to our mind to diagnose a memory leak?
I think those are the main three.
So I see here in the comments that GC traces. I don't know if it's really. I don't know how this list was made.
GC traces can help confirm whether you think you have a leak or not, right?
Oh yeah, BRD. Yeah, I see. We mentioned it actually.
Yeah. Because you can actually see from that activity, like, hey, are things being tenured, or is my memory just going up and down, and it's not really a leak at all.
Okay. If you feel that yes, sorry, go ahead.
I see there are three potential areas where the current tooling or the tools which we know of could be proved as inefficient. Number one, many of the APIs, JavaScript objects have C++ backends. And when the JavaScript objects are sitting in the JS heap, the C++ objects could be growing in the native heap, and there is definitely no 1:1 relations. For example, a 1 KB JS object could be mapped to a 1 MB of C++ object and vice versa. It all depends how the backend front end is implemented. And at the moment, there is no easy way to figure out what is occupied in the native heap in correspondence with what we see in the JS heap.
Let me see if I understand this example. So for example, if I have a HTTP object in JavaScript, it also points to native memory for the socket and other lower level things that are not on the V8 heap. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. For an HTTP abstraction, there is an HTTP wrap.cc, which creates a HTTP wrap C++ object.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something we have seen fairly regularly is a case where you're keeping JavaScript objects alive, but when you look at the heap, it's not clear that they're holding a lot of memory. And actually, to the GC, that's also the case. So there's no pressure on the GC to free up the heap because you're only using, like, say, 1K of GC memory. And so it never decides to GC, even if they could be released. But because they keep a large native block of memory alive, it ends up causing you problems.
Have you seen this in real world case scenarios? Because most of the applications I saw, the memory was the majority of memory was JavaScript heap. The native memory is usually a lot lower than the JavaScript heap allocated.
I don't think I've seen that with like the internal node structures, but sometimes with in the data stored by the application itself or through some native add-ons, I think that has been potentially an issue. Possibly because they've got a bug at the C++ side or something, but there's definitely been cases where it's like, hey, yeah, even if you're not doing GC, if you see your native memory growing, it's still possible that those are being kept alive, even though the GC could release them.
Yeah, I can see this happening. Just never seen this happen, but I can imagine it's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ideally, we would be able to get into a situation where we are able to see the relation between the JS object and the C++ object, and then get into the C++ object and walk through the dominator tree, if possible. And in each of the node, we see how much of the retention, how much memory is allocated for individual objects or nodes, etc. It's a big shot ambition, but yeah, that would be the ideal scenario for native memory tracking.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe we can check node.js internal C++ objects with the heap snapshot. We can use the memory retainer to check these C++ objects with the connection between the JS objects. It's available now, I believe.
Memory retainer object exists. That is used to track the C++ allocations, but the relation with the JavaScript object needs to be manually established, if I remember correctly.
The only thing I'm aware of, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Last time I'm checking that we can check C++ field and the relations with the JS object in the heap snapshot, so we can show up the C++ object and its field in the heap snapshot. That have to be manually checked, so that might not be very ideal, but it's possible.
Okay, yeah.
The one thing I'm aware of is, like, say, through an API, there's that just external memory method, which is intended to let, if you know that if you're allocating native memory when you're allocating objects, you can use that to tell the GC that, hey, we're actually using more memory than you know about. And then that's used to help try and trigger GCs as well. Although I think that's not exactly, I mean, it's related to the problem you were mentioning about how do we track that memory, but.
I don't think GC considers external memory as one of the reasons it will trigger.
I think that's the whole reason that's there.
I think it's only for statistics, because the GC only cares that the maximum amount of memory it can allocate will not be suppressed.
Right, but I thought that that one in particular was there so that it can be aware and actually, if that number is going up, actually, trigger GCs.
A little bit lost from note-taking point of view, the heap snapshot approach. Could someone summarize? Sorry for jumping back.
There's a C++ API that allows you to correlate a JavaScript object to how much external memory is being retained by that object. And
right.
So I think we use that on some of the native allocations from Node.js.
And the idea was that with the heap snapshot, you could correlate with that API, right?
Kind of, yes. You can correlate to how much memory. I'm not sure you can correlate to the exact object.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I'm not sure. Is that right, Jirish? I haven't used this API yet. I just saw that it was used on Core.
Yeah, that's right. At the moment, either the correlation is not possible or it's not available through any tooling. Even if there is a low-level association that's possible, we need to have that functionality exposed through a tool. So that was my first gap statement.
So even if we call that API, it's not available on Snapshot or the profiler.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the first thing we should do is try to get this into some tooling. Otherwise, anything we do trying to improve the consistency of the relation between JS objects and native memory, even if we get to a perfect point from a backend perspective, if we can't see it on tooling, it's pointless. So we should probably start by engaging with V8 to see if we can get this information on the heap profiler and the heap snapshot.
Although I think it would be higher priority to actually document our current state and tools.
Yes, I agree.
Right, like let's get our current thing documented in our guidance, and like here's what you can do. We can say here's some gaps, and then once we have that, I think then moving on to like how do we improve makes sense. Just wouldn't want to be distracted and not document these things first.
Okay, so we started with native memory. Do we want to do the same, but like gaps for maybe for heap profiler and heap snapshot? I'm just reading the notes from last time if we did that or not. I kind of don't remember.
I mean, the biggest gap with the heap snapshot is that, at least in my opinion, is it's not easy to go from the data and objects that you get reported to where those objects are or where they're coming from.
What do you so like
it may
connecting with
that,
code base or like?
It may report that you have like, yeah, you're growing 1,000 new objects on every cycle of your application. But then if you try and figure out, well, okay, where am I leaking in my application? You pretty much have to look at the object and from the fields or whatever, try and guess what it is. Like there's no easy naming.
Should we, instead of looking in gaps at the tooling, look at the gaps at the use case? Because some of this is solved by the sampling heap profiler.
Right.
Yeah,
So
but even in that case,
yeah, that's a good point.
but even in that case, you really just know where it was allocated, not where it was leaked, right? That's kind of the. But it's better than nothing. It gives you more of a hint that something.
Yeah, that then says, okay, you've allocated this object, maybe helps you figure out what the object is.
Yeah, so the heap snapshot will give you which objects are allocated, and the heap profiler will give you which code paths are allocating those objects. Where it's leaking is subjective to the application, so I don't think we can have a tool that determines that.
Well, in the heap snapshot, you can often, you know, it lets you see the difference between two heap snapshots. So you can say, okay, I'm growing these kinds of objects. I think the challenge is that like the sampling heap profiler won't necessarily have those at the top of its list. Right, like if you have something that's doing a lot of allocations but a lot of frees, although I guess the sampling profiler does give you things that were allocated but not freed, right?
I think V8 has this this hybrid profiler, but I never tried it, so I'm not sure.
And I think that's where if we could write up the guidance and try it out, we'd probably be in a better position to say, okay, then given that this is what we've got, what are the areas where it seems to be a shortcoming? Because you're right, it's more like if we had you've got this problem, go through these things, use these tools in this way, and then it's like, okay, well, what can I still not do? That would be a better way to attack than looking at one individually and saying, hey, here's the problem with that one or this one.
Okay. Okay, is there anything that we can capture now without going through, like people's previous experience?
Well, certainly like the heap snapshot. Recently, I was involved in one internally where the heap snapshot did end up pointing us to the right object, but it was more just because the name happened to match something that people who knew in the code was an object. I'm not even quite sure why the fixed it yet. But it's I don't know that that's helpful, but it's like it's definitely a challenge to necessarily look at your heap snapshot and say, okay, what is it that is leaking? There's still a lot of sort of, you need to know your application. And that one was found again through the multi snapshot. So it wasn't just look at one, it was like, okay, let's take 3 in a row after driving traffic and look at the deltas between those. So it's kind of like, okay, let's take a couple snapshots. Let's look at the delta between them. What are the ones which have the largest retainer sets, and sort of poke through to see if we can recognize what those objects are based on their fields and names and stuff like that.
Okay. So what could we do to improve that? So what could be an action item for this working group for the future? Is this something that we can do, or is that we have to reach out to V8, or like what is the...
As I mentioned, I think it's already available on V8 to take a heap snapshot that also tracks where things are allocated.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to check. I can try the API out and report back with any gaps that I found.
So that would capture where everything was?
Yes, my guess is that it's super expensive.
Yep.
But it's a heap snapshot that you take, and also it will report the objects and the actual code path. That's my understanding, at least from reading the docs. The docs are very vague, so I'm not sure if that's actually what the API does.
Right.
But we can try it out. So
maybe documenting could be a good first step.
Yeah, if the API does what I think it does, documenting it would be good. Understanding the overhead would also be important. If it doesn't, we should add to the list of things we need to talk with V8 about.
Yep. I think our main action item is to write drafts of how to use the heap and sampling heap profilers to debug a memory issue, right?
Agreed, yes.
Okay. Is there anyone who is interested to go after this? Okay, then maybe we can open issue and let's see if someone jumps in.
Sounds good. Like probably two. One, probably if we have like the how to use the sampling heap profiler, how to use the heap profiles. There might even be existing stuff out there, but if we open an issue for somebody to sort of look at what's already out there and then document the best practice.
I think someone sent a request for the heap snapshot.
Right, so we should look at that and
I'm
prioritize
sorry.
reviewing it.
Let me check. We merged that already. So heap snapshots we have on our docs. I mean on the repository docs. We just need the heap profiler as well.
Matthäus, what you linked is giving a 404.
Okay, that's weird.
Maybe you have some special. Oh, now it's working. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Okay, it's working after refresh.
Okay, so it's basically then pulling that into our, like, we have this structure to say, hey, here's your steps. How does that integrate into those steps?
Okay, is there anything we want to call out for around gaps at the moment for the JavaScript use case? Okay, then I guess the recommended tools is kind of what we collected, so I don't think we need a separate section for that. Does anyone feeling in a different way? For me, it kind of looks like that we are recommending the sampling heap profiler, the heap snapshot, and the grind for native memory use cases. And for the just to confirming the suspicion node report GC traces. Are we okay with this recommendation, or is there anyone who wants to have another tool in this list? Okay, then preferred guidelines. I think we should just agree what we want to document, and then we can distribute it to people like we did with the previous deep drive.
Right. I think this, I'm just pasting into the chat. This is kind of the structure of what we had, right?
Perfect. I was just looking for that link.
Right. The first one is like, my process runs out of memory. It's got symptoms, side effects, debugging, using the heap profiler, using the heap snapshot, but that's a typo. And actually we've got, yeah, so that one's actually in there.
I think then maybe what's missing is the user journey. So it's like, I think we covered nicely in this document, like how you are coming from a suspicion to confirming and to tracking it down. So I think that's the missing information maybe from here.
Right.
This just,
I thought you had a,
yeah, sorry.
I thought you had a PR for, like, I see there's a link for native tools. For some reason, I thought your PR was adding a reference to the Valgrind in there.
That was for the process crash.
Okay. So I can add, I'll PR that in, because like native tools, I think we can just say there to, you know, you can investigate the use at the native level through that.
And I see we have actually a complete document for heap snapshot, but we are missing it for the profiler. The profiler is full of to-dos.
Yeah.
GC traces, we have something, and the native tools, we need to link your document. Although you mentioned last time that maybe the crash document is not the same than the memory leak.
Well, I think I wrote it as, I think my comment was meant to be, Valgrind can also help you with like just crashes where you're double freeing. But it's not, it doesn't cover that yet. It covers the part where like, hey, memory, you're actually running out of memory, and it gives you the summary of where things are not being freed. So I think it's written not for the crash case, but for the memory leak case today.
Okay, so for me, it looks like one item is kind of incorporating the user journey from this. So how you come from suspicion to solution.
Yeah, I guess integrating that into that memory documentation would make sense.
One more item, the sampling heap profiler is not complete. So guess it would make sense to just to review or double check the existing ones. So the heap snapshot. And
Yeah, and
doing,
even like
doing the same.
Yeah, we have step 1, step 2, step 4.
And then maybe writing a background one for memory.
Well, sorry, I guess I still haven't quite communicated correctly. Like it's there for Valgrind is written for memory leak. It's not written for crash.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So I think we're okay.
Then,
I'll PR in a reference to that. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other? And we need to open the issues for these 2 action items to see if someone can pick them up.
The first one, basically, journey from suspicion to the solution. Is it some part of the activity started, or it's completely a fresh item?
I think it's how I see. I think it's a fresh item, but basically we documented in this document. So just turning this document to a more consumable.
Because I think the README, like in the node.js, the diagnostics documentation memory, the README has a little bit of that. So it would be taking that stuff and merging it into that README, I think.
Yeah. That's my thinking too.
Okay, I can attempt this.
Okay.
But I definitely will have missing pieces in terms of my understanding, especially on areas of certain V8 memory segments, for example, code segments and things like that, which are highly opaque to me. But yeah, let me make it try.
Thank you.
Where, yeah.
Is there anyone who want to sign up for the documenting the sampling heap profiler? Okay, I can take this one then. Reviewing the heap snapshot. I don't know who created the original document.
I can review the snapshot and GC tracing.
Okay, thank you.
I'll link the Valgrind one.
Okay, someone wants to open the issue about the 2 APIs we need to document and understand. Just opening the issue that someone needs to do that work. So have a place for this.
I can do that.
Thank you. Okay.
You can put either. Yeah.
So we have 3 more minutes. Maybe just a question that like. So would it make sense to continue with other deep dives in this format? How you feel about this whole what we are doing?
I think it's brought some focus, so I think that's good.
Okay. Yeah, I think a big question that a little bit discussed last week with Mattel is that like I think it's super useful the outcome. Just we should start to talk about how we popularize it in the community. So it's like it's great that we capture the knowledge, but like I feel what's the missing step is that the knowledge you're making to the people.
Definitely, but are we ready for that yet? Like, I think if we say like we go through memory and we say we're done, then we should like put on the press to say, okay, let's, write up things that we can get the foundation to promote and figure out how we promote it.
Okay. So we did the crash last time. Now we are doing the memory. So it looks like we have a CPU left. Yeah, maybe we should prioritize them and say that like probably it doesn't make sense to popularize before we have CPU because that's such a common use case. Actually, all of them are common use case. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about this at the next.
The only thing we did the crash one, but I don't see anything in the repo.
I think there's a pull request as well.
Okay, so maybe that's it. We need to get that pull request landed.
Oh no, it landed a few weeks ago.
Okay, because I'm just looking like I just looked here. I'll just paste it in the like there, and I just see...
we did. Oh, sorry, we did the abnormal termination. So probably the crash is like we can remove the crash then, or is it? It's probably the same now.
Yeah, I think it's the same. I don't see any difference between abnormal termination fresh.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
and these are all empty. Okay, we should remove the
Okay.
fresh.
So let's delete that. And then, like, if we say that, you know, we're pretty happy with what's in the abnormal termination, we could start to say, we could start to try and promote that and say, okay, what do we want to do to promote that? Do we want to, I mean, we could obviously individually tweet it, but do we want to like write a short blog post, or what is it that we think makes sense in terms of like trying to bring attention to it?
So I think the biggest thing is it shouldn't be only on the diagnostics working group. It should be probably on the website.
Okay.
As well. So maybe we should start looking into how to integrate these guides and user journeys and etc. on the website.
Okay.
On a side note, does anyone know how is the new website going? If there is an ADA for that?
I guess it sounds like there's more activity, but I don't think I'd want to tie anything we're doing to that at this point.
Makes sense.
Okay, I don't want to go over time now because I know people have
Sure.
meetings. Very last question, which topic should be the next one? So just people can prepare their mind. Maybe CPU, do you think?
CPU is a good one, yes.
Sure.
Okay, that should be
Sounds
easy, I feel, because we talk so much about earlier.
Maybe that one, and also discussing how we promote and get the message out.
Okay. Then I guess that's it for today, folks.
Okay.
Thank you for attending. And the next time we will probably do the same, but like a short 15, 20 minutes of catch up on topics and then CPU deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.